First of all, it was up to him. I wouldn't have a family because of IVF and the things that we need to do reproductive. My kids were born through that that way.
Tim Walz lying again about himself, about his wife, about his children, about the conception of his children. Remember this guy, Tim Walz? I mean, he's got a lot of lies in his closet. We've been uncovering them ever since he was announced as the running mate. The National Guard lies, the COVID lies, through the pandemic, on and on and on. But now he's got a brand new one. And this adds to the lies they're trying to tell about you. They're trying to tell you that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and MAGA Republicans are going to make in vitro fertilization illegal. Now, Donald Trump has actually gone out of his way to ensure that the federal government stays out of IVF. Again, personally, not a big fan of that policy of Donald Trump's, but I'm a mature grown-up, and I can deal with that when I'm voting for people, and I don't have to lie about it. Tim Walz, on the other hand, he wants to scare everybody about in vitro fertilization, and he needs to scare you so much that he's going to lie about it. Not just about Donald Trump's position, but about his own personal connection to the issue. Because apparently, Tim Walz's children were conceived via in vitro fertilization. Yeah, I didn't know that either, but here he is saying it himself.
Yeah, first of all, it was up to him. I wouldn't have a family because of IVF and the things that we need to do reproductive. My kids were born through that that way. And also I make sure that I'm the guys and our folks are investing in prenatal care. We're the ones that are there for universal pre-K. We're the ones that are providing school meals at this. I'm not going to back down one bit on this whole family values thing and it's us. That construct that he's putting out there is absolutely untrue. We're making it more affordable to have children by having paid family and medical leave so that you can go home when your kids are sick and take care of them. Or if you're a dad, I don't have to go right back to work 5 days later after my wife had a C-section because our insurance wouldn't pay for it. We're boosting those things up. There's nothing pro-family other than having women be incubators for their vision of this. And I don't know. Once again, it's weird. I don't want J.D. Vance talking about my family. I certainly don't want him talking about my daughter or my wife. It's none of his damn business. But I said the one thing is we need to talk about how we've invested in families. We have the most generous child tax credit, and it's what Vice President Harris is proposing for the country, that people are poor because they don't have money. And when kids don't have the money on the front end, all of the things that a chain reaction of can't learn, can't go on. So I'll challenge him on that. Where is J.D. Vance's pro-family? He's forcing people to have, not be able to have medical care if they have a bad pregnancy or something. We need to stand in front of that. And again, you don't need me to give a sermon, but try and live one. Try and be decent. Try and help your neighbors. Try and invest in those kids.
What an odious liar this man is. And I do love it. I do love it when they vomit out policies like this. This is the beauty of being a Democrat. See, conservatives, Republicans, we like to talk about higher principles and getting the government out of your lives and allowing you to be unchained by regulations and onerous taxes so that you can achieve the American dream by pursuing whatever path you want to take, because it's up to you, not for the government to force you to do anything. But see, that it's a little high-minded, it's a little altruistic, and it's hard to articulate sometimes if you're just, a politician or an elected official. But when you're a Democrat, man, all you got to do is just vomit all of these policies out. We got this tax credit, and we got that tax credit, and we're going to make this affordable, and we're going to provide this for free, and we're going to provide that for free. And my favorite one in all of it was poor people are poor because they don't have money. That's some really amazing knowledge that Tim Walz has. What a revelation. But did you catch the very beginning of it? This is the most important part of it, as he's lying about J.D. Vance and Donald Trump trying to get in the way of you utilizing in vitro fertilization, IVF. Did you hear what he said?
First of all, it was up to him. I wouldn't have a family because of IVF and the things that we need to do reproductive. My kids were born through that that way.
My kids were born through that way. If it were up to him, I wouldn't have a family because my kids were born with IVF. Now, that's not the first time he said it. We've got a couple of other examples of him saying it.
Today's IVF day. Thank God for IVF. My wife and I have 2 beautiful children. He thinks he needs to dictate that. And I've been saying this, the golden rule that makes small towns work so we're not at each other's throats all the time in a little town is mind your own damn business. I don't need him to tell me about my family. I don't need to tell him about my wife's health care and her reproductive rights. I don't need him telling my children what books they can read. He's fired to do that with whatever he wants, but I'm not interested in it. And I think rural America is, they are angry.
Now, he wants rural America angry, by the way. He exudes anger. He is just a simmering pot boiling over with anger and rage, you can tell. And he's going to use the government to satisfy that rage. But you heard it again, and I apologize. I know it's tedious to hear him just repeat the same talking points that he rehearses in front of his bathroom mirror every night before he goes to bed over and over again. But it's instructive to see that he's staying on message. I got my kids through IVF. In vitro fertilization, it's my family. He's making this personal about him and his children. How dare you, sir? How dare you? These are my children you're talking about, right? Doesn't get more passionate than that because he's America's dad. And again, I want to reiterate that J.D. Vance and Donald Trump are not in any way whatsoever proposing legislation at the federal level that would infringe on anybody's right to have in vitro fertilization. But that's not stopping him from lying about it. But the most important part is he's lying about his own children. Here he is doing it again.
Look, that includes IVF. And this gets personal for me and my family. When my wife and I decided to have children, we spent years going through infertility treatments. And I remember praying every night for a call for good news. The pit in my stomach when the phone rang, and the agony when we heard that the treatments hadn't worked. So it wasn't by chance that when we welcomed our daughter into the world, we named her Hope. When Vice President and I talk about freedom, we mean the freedom to make your own healthcare decisions.
All right. Now, that entire very gut-wrenching and tear-jerking statement was framed around the setup of IVF, right? His children.
Look, that includes IVF.
Right? That whole thing. So there's three different occasions. And well, to complete the set, we've got a fourth one too. We're hitting for the cycle here at a rally in Glendale last week.
When we wanted to have children, we went through years of fertility treatment. And I remember it was like it was yesterday, just waiting for good news. And then the phone would ring and you would be tensed up. And then you would hear that the treatments had failed. It would blot out the sun that you just wanted something so beautiful and so simple to have a child. And then one day, and it wasn't by chance, when that news came and we welcomed our daughter into the world, we named her Hope. We named her Hope. I'm not crying, you're crying. So
He is such a weird dude. Pretending to cry. I'm not crying, you're crying. All about his daughter, Hope, born because of IVF. If J.D. Vance and Donald Trump had their way, Hope wouldn't exist today because they're going to ban IVF. You see what this is all about? It's reproductive freedom. Except the New York Times has an article today about this. Welch family fertility journey ran not through IVF, but another common treatment, a fertility treatment, not IVF, had nothing to do with IVF. As Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota has introduced himself to Americans through stump speeches across the country in recent weeks, he has alluded to a journey through infertility for his family while warning that conservatives want to restrict in vitro fertilization. No, he hasn't alluded to it. It's been specifically stated. Let me just remind you, New York Times, there's no allusion here.
Today's IVF day. Thank God for IVF. My wife and I have two beautiful children.
That's not an allusion. That's a deliberate statement. New York Times, an allusion? Let's see that allusion again.
Yeah, first of all, it was up to him. I wouldn't have a family because of IVF and the things that we need to do reproductive. My kids were born through that that way.
Did he just allude to IVF as being the mechanism under which his children were born? Was that an allusion, New York Times? Or was that a direct, flat statement? No, but the New York Times is going to give as much grace as possible catching Tim Walz in another lie, and this time about his own children. How low do you have to go that you're lying about the conception of your actual child to score political points framed in a lie against your political opponent? Oh, the joy that they're bringing to politics. Are you feeling the joy? More from the New York Times. Many have assumed that his family relied on IVF to conceive their two children. Why? Why would we assume that? Maybe because he said it multiple times. How dare you jump to that assumption? You're making an ass out of you and me. Several news outlets, including the New York Times, Associated Press, and the Minnesota Star Tribune, have reported that the family relied on in vitro fertilization. You know why they reported on it? Because they reported on what Tim Walz said. Fertility advocates concluded as much after hearing Mr. Walz talk. In April, Tim Walz for Governor campaign office mailed out a fundraising letter in an envelope that read, "My wife and I used IVF to start a family." I don't know why people assumed that he used IVF to start a family, except for his campaign putting out a mailer that said, my wife and I used IVF to start a family. When asked if the Walzes wanted to share more details about their effort to conceive, the Harris-Walz campaign recently clarified that the couple did not rely on IVF, but rather another common fertility procedure called intrauterine insemination, or IUI. Tim Walz lying again about himself, about his wife, about his children, about the conception of his children, and lying so that he can further a lie that he's telling about Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and IVF. And to make it personal, I'm not crying, you were crying.